I know as an organization and as a group, you get many speakers who stand right here and tell you, I'm going to speak to you today about Louisiana's most critical issue. And I'm here to tell you that I am going to speak to you today about Louisiana's most critical issue. Except we have the data, we have generations of poor outcomes, generations of low educational attainment, and generations of poverty to back this claim up. There is no more critical issue to Louisiana right now than the intersection of literacy and economic development. We've proven over generations that we can mortgage our children's future. We can give everything away that we want to. Need a highway? We'll build it. Need a port? You got it. Need tax incentives? You can have it. I'm not going to touch that today. But the fact remains, until we have the employable and viable workforce, we will continue to mortgage our children's future away. That intersection is literacy and economic development. And good afternoon again. It is a great opportunity to be here for you, with you this afternoon. And I do want to touch on three main points today. One, I want to tell you a little bit about the Center for Literacy and Learning. And then I also want to talk about literacy and economic development. But then I want to end with some of the bills and the packages that we're working on this session. The Center for Literacy and Learning has been around for 30 years. 1992, we are celebrating our 30th anniversary this year. We have on our staff a combined 386 years of education experience and expertise. From the classroom to literacy specialists to coaches, and we're positioned throughout Louisiana. And although we're a Louisiana nonprofit, up until about 3 years ago, the majority of our work was actually done outside of Louisiana. We're a national organization. We provide training to educational systems and programs across the country, from East Coast to West Coast. We also host one of the largest literacy and early learning conferences in the nation. March 8th through the 10th, 2023, we will have our 28th institute called Plain Talk About Literacy and Learning Institute. It will be in New Orleans. Last year, our first year back after the pandemic, we had close to 1,800 attendees attend this conference in New Orleans in early February, just a few months ago. It's an international conference. We have attendees from multiple countries. We have keynote speakers from all over the world that all come here to Louisiana for the Plain Talk Institute about literacy and learning to understand how can we provide better instruction and support to early learners in the classroom around literacy. It's a great opportunity for us and our conference. One of the things that's important to know, like so many other great things, while we have a 30-year history, we began because of one parent. One individual had a vision. She was an educator, she is an educator, and she had children who had exceptional learning abilities, and she saw that those needs in the classroom weren't being met around early learning and literacy. And she made a commitment to begin a movement to do something about it. And here we are 30 years later, rather. See, part of the crisis, part of the most critical issue is in our reality, 1 in 4 fourth graders, 1 in 4 fourth graders are strong, proficient readers, according to national assessments. 1 in 4. Now, there's some state testing that'll tell you, 50, 60% of our students are reading on grade level. But according to national assessments, which we use to gauge how we are doing against other states, 1 in 4, not just readers, but strong, proficient readers. Why is that critical? Well, we understand by age 3, close to 90% of the brain has been developed. By age 8, 90 to 95% of that brain is developed. We understand the critical nature of those early years and how we create a strong foundation to be a strong reader. Because you see, from birth to 8, you're learning to read. After you get to 4th grade on, you're reading to learn. It's a critical juncture in that young person's life, and we have to do something about it. The tragedy in all of this is, as a country, we're not doing much better. 1 in 3 students across this country are strong, proficient readers by 4th grade. So while Louisiana is near the bottom, misery loves company, right? As a nation, we're not doing very well. So the opportunity there is to catch up, to go from the 1 in 4 to at least the 1 in 3 and then beyond. And I'll talk about how we can do that in just a little bit. We've had a lot of attention turned towards COVID and its impact on learning, a lot of learning loss. And that's a real phenomenon, if you will. It's a reality that our teachers are having to face, that our students are having to face, and families are having to face. But the reality is, we were not doing well before the pandemic. In fact, we have data, and you have it in your packet, that from 2018 to 2020, which part of that, of course, is before the pandemic, we were already doing poorly with our outcomes. In other words, the number of children and students reading on grade level was actually decreasing from 18 to 19, 19 to 20. So while the pandemic certainly exacerbated things for us, we were having challenges long before then. When we talk about 3rd grade being the critical piece, being the critical juncture, then we also have to talk about the research behind literacy and why it's so critical. We understand that the impacts of literacy span beyond just poor grades in schools, but it affects all aspects of a person and their community in terms of access, in terms of opportunities. I hinted at it earlier, the economic viability of our state. When we talk about the economic viability of Louisiana, yes, we have to talk about infrastructure. We have to talk about transportation, capacity, quality of life, reasons for families to live here and to stay here. But in that infrastructure, in that quality of life, is the opportunity to ensure that our students are literate, not only literate, but strong, proficient readers as they move beyond 3rd grade into graduation and such. We know from research that a mother's ability to read, her status as literate or illiterate, directly impacts her children's health. We know that from research. We know that literacy increases an individual's ability to access and understand basic health care. We know socially that people who are completely or functionally illiterate face the prospect of economic dependency and lack of social cohesion throughout their life. We know civically that people who have low literacy attainment or are illiterate often do not participate in basic democracy, voting, participating, being informed. And of course, we know economically that the costs are great. But one of the things we did this past year, leading up to this session, is we went around all of Louisiana. We hosted a series of lunch and learns around literacy and economic development. We took this topic and this conversation to every corner of Louisiana. And the whole reason, or part of the impetus of why we did this, is a national report that was released a few years ago by the Business Roundtable on why reading matters. And while we talk about, from an educational perspective, the challenges and the needs to address illiteracy, the Business Roundtable is a group of private business and corporate CEOs, some of the most successful in this country and around the globe. These individuals, these business leaders, got together and produced this report in 2016, Why Reading Matters. And from this report, and remember, these are not educators per se, but these are business and industry leaders. These folks represent a significant chunk of our economy and millions of employees in our country. And they found and supported the idea that improving third grade reading proficiency is uniquely powerful to address the skill gaps over the long term. They also found that reading is one of the most commonly and intensively used skills among all types of jobs. Economic returns from reading are proficiently higher in the U.S. than in other developed countries. What that means is, as a nation, remember, these very successful business and industry leaders are saying, we have the quickest and the most to gain by investing in literacy as an industrialized nation, that we have to look at the literacy attainment of our students and how it affects our economy. They also emphasize in their report that strong reading skills are required as a foundational knowledge for STEM. We hear, we see, and rightfully so, a lot of attention on STEM, science, technology, engineering, mathematics, all of those things. And those areas are critical. But to be successful in those areas, you have to be a strong, proficient reader. And we need you, every student, to be a strong, proficient reader by the end of third grade. When we talk about the economic impact, students who are not strong, proficient readers by fourth grade are significantly less likely to graduate high school. They're significantly more likely to engage in at-risk behaviors. Over their lifetime, a student or a young adult who does not graduate high school loses over a quarter of 260,000 rather of potential lifetime earnings in their income. And then we know from the last numbers the department reported, which was right before COVID, at that time we were spending $270 million a year on remediation and support for struggling readers. And some of that has changed recently, and I'll talk about that when I talk about some of our legislation. The key question is, are we okay with 1 in 4 fourth graders reading proficiently at that point? Is that something we're willing as a state to live with? And that's the answer that we've got to address. You know, when you look at the history of the Center for Literacy and Learning, and I mentioned earlier we're turning 30 this year, the center has long been a leader in policy reforms and legislation to change how we instruct and teach young learners, and particularly in the area of literacy. You may hear reference so often to the Early Literacy Commission, where a lot of the recommendations that are now legislation that either passed last year or working through the process this year. The Early Literacy Commission was a project that this organization, the center, led and pushed for in 2019. We worked with the department, we worked with our legislative partners, and we were able to find support for an Early Literacy Commission. Last year, we renewed that commission for another 2 years. So a lot of the recommendations you're seeing is a result of the work of that commission, which this organization helped to lead, to create. We do so because at the center, we believe in the power of literacy to change lives, and we work tirelessly with partners across sectors to support literacy initiatives today to ensure gains for our students and our state and our nation. And I mentioned earlier, we have 30 years of service and a simple yet powerful vision. We believe everyone is empowered through literacy. We're working to advance literacy and learning in the classroom. And we know that there's a blueprint waiting for us. And that blueprint, believe it or not, is the state of Mississippi. Some folks get tired of us talking about the state of Mississippi. In 2013, we could have said, well, at least we're ahead of Mississippi. In 2019, do you know who was the #1 state in improvement among students in literacy in the nation? You guessed it, Mississippi. Now they're outperforming the national averages. Mississippi. If there was ever an apples to apples comparison for Louisiana, it's Mississippi. I'm born and raised in Louisiana. I've raised my own children here. I lived a few years in Mississippi pursuing a doctoral degree, worked there, worked with a whole network of universities. I know Mississippi very well. And I can tell you, there has never been a more perfect apples to apples comparison. And so by following elements of that model, we can improve. And a lot of it starts in the early childhood space, which we advocate for. Increase access to quality early childhood. We worked with legislative partners last year to help pass key legislation to make sure all of our teachers in K-5 are educated in the science of reading. And I don't have time today to explain carefully, or thoroughly rather, the science of reading, but that's something I'd be happy to talk with you some more about. I also wanted to touch, as I mentioned that earlier, a little bit on some legislation we're working. And so on our website, which you have all of that information in front of you, we track on our advocacy page all of the bills that we're working and that are priorities for us. But I want to highlight just a few because I believe my time to speak is wrapping up, and then it'll be Q&A for us. 3 bills by Representative Richard Nelson, Representative Nelson from the Mandeville area. House Bill 214 requires passage of a reading instruction test as a condition of teacher certification. We believe every teacher in K-5 should be certified in literacy reading instruction. And that certification is grounded in the science of reading. It's helping those teachers understand the correlation between brain development and how we develop strong readers. That's a good one. Of course, it's a good one. And this is part of the Mississippi model. Representative Nelson also has a bill, House Bill 865, that would prohibit any curriculum or materials that's not aligned with the science of reading. And not to get too much into the weeds on that, but it would prohibit this idea that we can provide visual clues and pictures and students learn how to read on their own. I'm oversimplifying it, but that's essentially, as a non-educator, how to understand that bill. So it prohibits that type of curriculum, which we think is obviously very good. Another one that he has authored that we're supporting that might be a little tougher as we prepare for Senate education, hopefully this week, is House Bill 269. There was an article over the weekend, you probably saw it, It would prohibit promotion of students from 3rd to 4th grade unless those students with reading deficiencies. And these are the students who would be in most significant need of interventions and support. Now, to talk a little bit about that bill and what it does, let me say what it doesn't do. It doesn't take away the decision-making authority of the local school districts. It just gives them further guidance on how to make those decisions. It doesn't prevent a local school district from retaining a student earlier, 2nd grade, 1st grade, kindergarten. What it does is it places emphasis on the realities, on the science, that our 3rd graders need to be leaving 3rd grade, entering 4th grade as strong, proficient readers. It's that important. It provides the interventions and the supports and the guidance that local school districts will need to ensure that this is happening. A couple of other bills I really want to mention very quickly. Representative Jason Hughes has a bill, HB 911, that provides a lot of interventions and services in the early grades, helps to encourage and create opportunities for local schools to have literacy coaches throughout the state. All of these pieces, including the Nelson bills, are pieces that came from the Mississippi model that we want to implement here. Training teachers, ensuring we have science of reading curriculum, and then ensuring that our students are only being promoted to 4th grade and beyond when they're strong readers. Representative Hughes, Representative Schlegel has another bill, also has a bill that she is working through, HB 852, that would actually put books in the hands of struggling readers that they can take home and they own. That book distribution we feel is very important. And then Representative Marino has a couple bills addressing dyslexia and that issue. So I feel like, I have about 2 hours more of information I'd love to share with you, but I feel as though I better not do that, but would be happy to answer any questions that you may have at this point. Our message today was that Louisiana's most critical intersection is where literacy and economic development meet. Where we have only 1 in 4 4th graders who are strong, proficient readers, we really have to take this message beyond the classroom to get stakeholders and the broader community involved in improving literacy across our state.
Where do Louisiana's 4th graders rank compared to a state like Mississippi?
Well, Mississippi actually has had some tremendous reforms since 2013. So in terms of student growth and improvement, they're number 1 in the nation. In terms of overall attainment in literacy, Mississippi ranks above the national average, putting them in the 20s as far as a state. Louisiana continues to rank at or near the bottom, although we're very helpful because since the creation of the Early Literacy Commission in 2019, that we were instrumental in getting created in the legislature, many of the reforms that have been proven successful in Mississippi are being implemented here in Louisiana, including some legislation we're working on this session.
What are the bills in this session of the legislature that would improve this situation?
Well, we really feel Representative Richard Nelson's House Bill 269 bill, which would prohibit 3rd graders who are not strong readers from being promoted to the 4th grade. We feel that although that's a challenging policy decision, we feel that that was one of the key pieces in the Mississippi model that improved educational attainment. Another critical bill is Representative Jason Hughes, House Bill 911, that would provide support, interventions, and call for more literacy coaches throughout our school campuses all over Louisiana. And then finally, a third piece I want to mention as well is Representative Laurie Schlegel's bill to put books in the hands and families of struggling readers who are in kindergarten through 5th grade.
Talk about the impact between, or the intersection between economic development and literacy. How does that play out?
Well, considering that 3rd grade reading level is fundamental to a child's educational success, we see how generations of poor outcomes have led us to a point where our workforce, the employability of it, the ability for us to attract good living wage jobs is severely hampered because often we have a workforce that doesn't have those literacy skills, those employability skills to really help fill some of those high need jobs.
How can people get more information?
They can visit our website. That's the best place, www.mycll.org. Find us on Facebook or Twitter, the Center for Literacy and Learning, and we have a tremendous wealth of information and resources that they can use to help inform them, whether it's policy or just engaging at home with your own family.